Yo, welcome to Sig Slayers, the comic interview show, period. I'm Mike the Sig Slayer, chilling with Mark the Honorable Villain. What up, fam?
What's up, Mike? We have the mastermind behind Radiant Black and the Massiverse. Let them know who we got, man.
Today, comic writer Kyle Higgins is with us. But before we chat with Kyle, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and please comment. All right. Our next guest is one of the hottest writers in all the comics. He has written Nightwing, Batman Beyond, Power Rangers, Ultraman, and his own Radiant Black series. Ladies and gentlemen of the Stash Land, we bring to you writer Kyle Higgins. How you doing, Kyle?
I'm good, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, man, we like to bring out the hypeness, man. So we like to hype you up. I know you're a chill dude, but thank you for joining us, Kyle, and taking time out of your schedule. We're gonna just dive right on in. So, Kyle, since it's your first time joining us, we like to get your comic book origin story. In other words, how did you get your first gig in pro comics?
Right. Well, it all kind of dates back to a film that I directed in college. It was my college thesis film. It was called The League, which years later became the basis for our series Cowl, which is actually retroactively the first book in the Massiverse, our shared creator-owned superhero universe. The film was about a half hour long, about a superhero labor union of 1960 Chicago, shot entirely on Super 16 millimeter film, a ton of visual effects, ton of wire work, costumes. It being period, set in Chicago, mostly shot in LA. Like there was a lot that went into it. Almost killed me multiple times, but when it was finished, we put it online, and there was an illustrator that I had hired early on in like 2007, before we ever shot anything, to design the main characters. He had a very kind of Silver Age kind of style. Eric White was his name, and he'd done some mainstream Marvel stuff, some Captain America stuff as well. He was also the ghost artist on the OC for all those episodes where Seth is trying to be a comic book artist. That's all Eric's work. So I'd hired Eric to design the characters, and we stayed in touch over the course of maybe I hired him even earlier than 07, because it was over the course of like a year and a half or almost 2 years later that we actually finished the film in the fall of 2008. And Eric offered to do a really, really cool thing, which was to send the film out to everyone he knew in film, TV, and comics. And at the time, he had a pilot deal at ABC as well as, a career in comics. So it was a pretty robust list that he sent it to. And one of the first people that watched the film and emailed me was Joe Quesada, who was the editor-in-chief of Marvel at that time. So we traded emails. Joe, I remember I woke up at 6 a.m. I'd been up till 2 getting the film online on our website and everything. This was only 2 years after YouTube had launched. So we were on Vimeo. We had a really nice website, polished website that was branded for the film and felt like old newspapers and stuff like that. And Joe's email at 6 a.m. was Kyle, I get sent, videos all the time. Sometimes I watch them, and I started yours, and I watched the whole thing, and your love of film and comics and superheroes shows up in every frame, and if there's ever anything I can do for you, please let me know. And so I wrote back, and I told him I was a really big fan of his, and I was, and I figured, I wanted, my first love is filmmaking, is directing. Writing comics wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to do, but it's something that I don't know, I love comics and I loved them my whole life. So I was in that moment thinking, this kind of feels like a window at least cracked open here, and what the heck, I'm gonna take a shot. And I told him if he's ever looking for new writers, he should let me know. And so that started a back and forth, and he ended up sending the film around to all of his senior editorial staff. And Joe Quesada, or Tom Brevoort actually watched it, and I think he liked it. He's never told me, but he reached out a couple weeks later and said, he wanted to start talking to me and see if there could be a fit for something. And so I had kind of a green light to pitch. So I pitched for about a year and a half, about 20 different stories, like kind of fully broken outlines, like the whole 9 yards. And finally, we were kind of I was able to figure out, because the problem with something like that is when you're pitching a story, if you're invited to pitch, like if you're going off of what's on stands as far as like continuity and things like that, like you're already behind the 8 ball, because those things are planned out 6, 8, 10 months in advance. So it was a little tricky, because a lot of times I'd pitch something, you'd be like, oh, we already have plans for that. Or I was just pitching stuff cold, like characters cold. And he's like, if it's a good story, we'll find a place for it. And inevitably you'd be like, okay, I like this one, this one, this one. I've shared them with those series' respective editors. And it's like, well, those guys don't know me. Like, they're not, this isn't going to go anywhere. So I finally was able to get him to tell me what possible like slots he would have available and need something for. And one of them was a World War II era Captain America story. And so my best friend Alex Siegel, who wrote The League with me, and we co-created Kyle together, and he still works with us at Black Market Narrative on he's more on like the video side now in editing. He shoots and edits for Bear McCreary and a host of others. Alex, a huge World War II aficionado, and we were talking about this kind of prompt, and kind of came up with a story on the spot about Steve Rogers being waking up as a prisoner of war in a camp in Germany, and he doesn't know, or I guess it would have been, maybe it was in France, but yeah, it was in France. He wakes up and they don't know he's Captain America, and so now he has to escape, but he also has to like liberate all of the other POWs that are there. And so it got through. Tom liked it, and that became my first comic. So I wrote that in the fall of fall of 2009, and it came out in December of 2009. And we were kind of off to the races at that point.
Wow. And so I find it very interesting that film was your home base. That was your forte, and not comics. We researched and we found out that you worked with Dick Donner, the late great Dick Donner. Is that true?
Yeah. Actually, let me see if I can pan my camera over here. So next to me, it doesn't really want to pan. That is it's a one sheet from Superman, and it's signed by Dick. Kyle, hope to sign your DGA card. Best, Richard Dick Donner. And the poster actually belonged to Tom Mankiewicz, who was my mentor in college, and he wrote really what became the final version of Superman. He's credited as a creative consultant because of union rules and stuff like that, but he really wrote what became the final version of the film. So yeah, it was. I mean, look, I love comics, and I have my whole life, but my love of superheroes, film, and comics really came out of my love of like superhero movies when I was growing up. And so Donner's Superman and Tim Burton's Batman, and even especially them in high school, like Sam Raimi was making the first 2 Spider-Man films, and the Bryan Singer X-Men films, and Blade, of course, and all the animation and cartoons of the 90s, like really ended up bringing me to comic books. So there was quite a bit of overlap for me from an interest standpoint in both mediums. So when it became time to plan what I wanted to do as a thesis film, I figured, you know what, if I'm going to take a really, really big swing and try to make a calling card, this is something that I only really know how to do things one way, which is kind of all out. And this is going to have to be something that, I'm living with not only for the rest of my life, but definitely for the next couple of years. And if I'm going to put everything into this, like, I want to go and work in the genre that really inspired me to want to start directing, which was superheroes. And that's the fact that it led to a career in comics and that career in comics has now led back to film is, you know, it's a long and winding road, as the Beatles song says. And it's very true. I mean, the longer you're doing something like this, I think the creative life in general is as much about creating the twists and turns that are as sometimes exciting as the very ones you're living through, even if they're quite a bit different. And I think that's very much been the case in my career.
What was the number one thing that you learned from Dick Donner?
So Dick used to say that like 90 or 95% of directing was casting, and he's totally right. And I actually think it applies in comics quite a bit as well, because like putting people in positions to do their best work and succeed is like really the name of the game. And I think that there's a big difference between hoping and thinking someone might be the person that's a fit for what is in your head or your vision for it. And sometimes they can be not what was in your head at all, but they're just so good that it reshapes what your version of it, you know, intended version is. But more often than not, I've found that when you're putting people in positions where they're not the fit, it's you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. Like there's such a difference between having the right person in a role, as well as having the right collaborator on a book. Now, sometimes it's out of your hands, especially as a writer, and if you're doing work for hire stuff. But other times you do have a say in that and some control. And so I do think it's like making sure that the person that you want to work with is the person for the gig.
Kyle, you've made it in comics. You've worked with the biggest publishers, Marvel, DC, Boom, and Image. When do you decide to work with which publisher? And how do you acquire gigs from Marvel and DC these days? You said you used to pitch. Do you still pitch books, or do they come to you?
Well, it really depends on if I need money.
Yeah.
No, it depends on what my priorities are, what I'm looking for, and if it's an offer or an opportunity, like how exciting is the opportunity at kind of this stage of my career. I feel very fortunate to be in that kind of position. But the other side of it is whether we're talking about, specifically on the publisher front, whether we're talking about work for hire jobs or creator-owned books. There's a reason why I've done all of my creator-owned books at Image, and it's because it's the best deal. It's not even the best deal in comics, it's the best deal in entertainment. Like, the publisher does not touch any of the intellectual property. They're not trying to glom on to be movie producers. They're not trying to hold on to it with business control. You and your, you know, in the case of like Radiant Black, your co-creator like Marcelo, we own Radiant Black entirely. And that has always been really important to me, predominantly because I've seen what happens out here. I live in LA, like I've been here for 20 years, and I know how many people are trying to get a movie made or a show made or, you know, or a whatever. And I have friends who have created really successful books that they don't control, much less own. And I've seen how that can go sideways. And so it's always been something really important to me. In a lot of those other publishers that do creator-owned books, they're not really creator-owned. They're at best creator co-owned. And look, I talk with people about this all the time. I really believe in something at this kind of stage of my career, in the way that I look at things, which is it an equitable exchange? So depending on where you're at in your career, signing that contract that gives that, you know, mid-level publisher ownership of the book, or at the very least business control of the book, maybe that is an equitable exchange for the credentialing and the opportunity that that gig is providing for you, you know, especially if you're starting out, right? But when you're in a position where you don't have to give away the farm, then it comes down to like making sure that, you know, the deals you're making are in your best interest as a creator. On the work for hire front with like Marvel and DC, sometimes they come to me, other times I go to them. I'm doing a little bit more at DC now, which is weird. I didn't think I was gonna go back, but you know, we pitched this book, Immortal Legend Batman, like 5 years ago, and it started with designs that Dan Mora did, and he was just posting online. And you know, Dan and I know each other pretty well from our time on Power Rangers, and so Matt Groom and I were talking, and I was like, would it be crazy to like ask Dan if you want to like put together a pitch with us on this, you know? And Matt's like, I don't think that's crazy at all. And so I texted Dan and I proposed just that. And so we built this take that became Immortal Legend Batman. And I reached out to, you know, editors at DC I knew, and we were just starting to get some traction and some conversations when in like, I want to say it was like May or June of 2020, like everybody got like laid off at DC. And so everyone we were talking to was gone. And so this it just kind of went away, the potential book. And then last year I bumped into an old editor of mine from my Power Rangers time, Matt Levine, and he's doing Elseworld stuff now at DC. And I said, well, look, like, I'm like crazy busy, but there's this thing that Matt and I have wanted to do for like 5 years. And we sent over the pitch, and it was probably like the fastest and smoothest green light process I've ever had on a book. So the book's been an really incredible experience, and it's a different era at DC than when I was predominantly writing there. And so there's some stuff that, you know, that may or may not come to be that I'm talking to them about. And sometimes it comes from a like, hey, we're looking for something like this, are you interested? And sometimes I am and sometimes I'm not. And then other times it comes from a like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if kind of conversation, and then figuring out like, would that be possible? Like, could we get that approved? Like, so it really does kind of varies from book to book.
All right, now I want to shift gears to the Radiant Black and the Massive Universe. We want to get a little bit of the origin of Radiant Black as it pertains to what did it take to get it going and up and running?
Well, it was a unique opportunity in that I originally was planning Radiant Black to be something quite a bit different. There was a project that I was doing that was originally, it was just going to be like a little 6-issue thing that was like a like kind of post-tech dystopic world far in the future where something had happened 200 years earlier, and you learn eventually that it had to do with these like miniature black holes that became these transforming catalysts for these like kind of 4 essentially like, I guess like superheroes, I guess you could say. And even then I thought like, oh, there could probably be like a Toku kind of influence. But the story wasn't about that. That was all the backstory. The story was about this kind of older guy who's like a Mad Max type. It's like a coyote type character who you hire to get you to move you across like the barren lands and stuff, like to get you from, you know, fiefdom city to fiefdom city. So it's kind of like a you know, like Blade Runner cities in a Mad Max world. And it was going to be called the miniature black hole was like a MacGuffin of it, because one resurfaces, and they were called Radiance, and the name that I came up with was Radiant Black. And, it was something that there were one or two artists that I was talking to about doing it. And then coming out of New York Comic Con in 2019, Kian Torme was the artist that was the last artist that I was going to do it with. And we had this conversation in New York because he was starting to get some real big offers from DC. And we had this kind of career talk where it was like, there's two paths in front of you, and neither is the wrong path, but you can't do both at this stage of your career. And so he wanted to, and I think I even recommended, I was like, if they're giving you Batman work, like, go do Batman. Like, you should, you're excited about that, but also, like, it's a really good opportunity. And so he went down that path. And so I just kind of like put the project on pause. And a couple weeks later, Eric Stevenson and I were chatting. He's the publisher of Image. And he said, oh yeah, by the way, if I ever talk to you about like creating an original superhero? And I was like, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, would you have any interest in that? And I was like, well, yeah, but I figure there's not a market for something like that, especially like I did Cowl like now 10 or 11 years ago. And Eric was like, no, I think there could be. And he walked me through some different things over the years with Spawn in different numbers and Invincible. And he was like, you don't even have to think of it as like traditional superhero. Think of it as optimistic sci-fi if you want. He's like, I don't want Batman and Superman analogs, like something contemporary, something right now. And I said, well, I said I had that thing that we were going to do. I was like, there's a version of doing it, straight, like doing it now, like kind of all the backstory I was kind of like hinting at, like actually just doing that as like a proper book. And he's like, yeah, that could be really cool. And he said, oh yeah, and like if there are any other creators who you think would be interested in this, like feel free to let them know. Like he was looking to do more Image superhero universe stuff. And so I was like a dog with a bone. Like I just grabbed it and held on and sprinted, like from like right out of the gate. Like it was like, okay, this could really be something. And there's the book is designed in a certain way so that it could be something that if it worked, we could do for a long time. It would be something that hopefully could grow and change with Marcelo and myself. And it wouldn't be something that we would resent having to do for 10 or 15 years or anything like that. And it's funny to think back on that now because, Robert Kirkman has this saying that Eric used to tell me, which is like, you can't pick your hits, which is very true. But I was pretty determined that I was at least going to set this up in a way that if it worked, because again, like from the moment he said that, all I knew was like, I only know how to do this one way, which is all out. And I'm going to take a really, really big swing with this. And fortunately, it has worked. But after we hung up on that call, or well, it was over text after we finished, first person I called was Ryan Parrott, who was doing Power Rangers after me. But Ryan's like one of my best friends. We went to college together. And I actually got him his first gig working on Gates of Gotham at DC. And so I told him the same thing, and Ryan loves Image. He loves Image superheroes. He's a few years older than me, so it was like he was the sweet spot age when Youngblood launched and Spawn and Savage Dragon and Wildcats and everything. And I think like 3 days later, Ryan had already built what became the basis in the pitch of Rogue Sun. But the funny thing is that even before that, I was working with Matt Groom and Michael Basudel, who edits and designs all the books in the Massiverse, on what became Inferno Girl Red. It was called Dragon Girl Red at that time. And that's a testament to Matt. I mean, it was his idea that there could be a kind of like an original YA coded, Toku influenced young hero. And he wanted to do it as a series of original graphic novels. So I was working as the editor on it, and we were trying to find the right artist. And we were working with someone, it looked very, very different than what Inferno Girl Red became. But after Radiant Black and Rogue Sun kind of got going, and just as we got the numbers on issue 1 of Radiant Black, which was before the issue even came out, we knew it did very, very well. And so suddenly we all had this conversation. I called everybody on a Saturday night and I was like, look, there's a brass ring just sitting there, and if we don't grab it, someone else will. Like, let's do this together. Like, let's like carve out a corner of this. At the time, we were thinking the Image superhero universe, and Inferno Girl Red needed to be in a different universe from the one like where Rogue Sun and Radiant Black are set. But like, we figured out on the call, like, we could totally make this work, and that became how we started building, you know, a very new superhero line for the 2020s.
Kyle, you're coming up on 5 years since the start of Radiant Black. Can you give us any more exciting news about the future of the Massiverse?
Well, I mean, we made a lot of announcements at New York Comic Con this year. We are officially doing. Well, I'll go in order. So, for Radiant Black, we're finishing up issue 39 right now, and in February 10th, 2026, that actually is the exact 5-year anniversary of Radiant Black launching with issue 1 in 2021. So we are kind of building that as like unofficial, or maybe official if we can get enough press out of it, Radiant Black Day. It's a Tuesday, so New Comic Book Day is the next day, and we've got a couple things that we're going to be, a couple special things we're going to be rolling out. So the first thing is we're going to be doing a big issue 1, new version of issue 1 that's called Radiant Black and White, and it is a black and white comic, a version of Radiant Black issue 1. But it's 40 pages long because it has the script for the entire issue in it. And the script is different in some spots, especially dialogue, than what the finished book turned out to be. So we're putting that out. It's the David Finch and Jimmy Reyes inked cover in just the inks with a gorgeous foil logo treatment on it. And then we're going to do a variant of it with pencils. The pencil version. And that reminds me, I gotta send an email to somebody. And then oh shoot, yeah, well, I'll come back to that. Hopefully it's not too late. And then the second thing is that on the night before that New Comic Book Day, so actually on February 10th, we are going to be doing a party at Revenge of in Los Angeles. Our friends over there are going to be throwing us a Radiant Black party and celebration, because we're also going to be releasing volume 1 of our full voice cast audiobook for Radiant Black. So that's something that's been in the works for a couple years now. It stars Will Friedle and Ryder Strong as Marshall and Nathan. And Yatko from Jujutsu Kaisen is Satomi. Phil Morris is voicing Wendell, Radiant Yellow. Melissa Navia from Star Trek Strange New Worlds, she's voicing Eva, Radiant Pink. Troy Baker is going to be joining us for Shift. It's a really killer lineup and voice cast. I'm directing the whole thing. I'm actually like doing all editorial on it as well, so it's been a lot. But
Ryder Strong is what, Boy Meets World? Isn't that Boy Meets World?
Yeah.
The best friend, right?
Yeah, he's Sean on Boy Meets World. Yeah. And Will is from Boy Meets World as well, but also Batman Beyond, and a host of other, big voice gigs over the years. So that'll be out on Tuesday, February 10th, and then. For Rogue Sun, we just put out issue number 30, which was really special, and it was a crossover with, it wasn't a crossover, I guess, it was guest starring Medieval Spawn, set way back in the, I think, 13-ish hundreds. And at the end of that was a pretty cool reveal of the Violator and the announcement that the story is continuing in a big Rogue Sun X Medieval Spawn crossover next year. So that's something we're in the early stages of right now, but we're still finalizing the format of that. It'll probably be called, probably flip the order. That'll probably be called Medieval Spawn X Rogue Sun. But or maybe there's two issues like Batman and Spawn, and we flip it, for each one. So that's coming up. That's a pretty exciting one. And then Inferno Girl Red is actually about to hit final order cutoff for book 2. Similar to book 1, because remember I mentioned it was important to Matt that these be designed as original graphic novels. Book 1 came out, I believe, 2 years ago. Maybe it's 3 years at this point. But it's a 120-page graphic novel drawn entirely by Erica D'Urso and colored by Igor Monti, lettered by Becca Carey, written by Matt. So it's the entire Immortal Legend Batman team plus myself. We jumped from Inferno Girl to Immortal Legend Batman. I don't write Inferno Girl, that's all Matt. But we serialized it at Image as 3 floppy books. So I think they're 3 40-page issues. Perfect bound with a spine. So we're doing the same thing on book 2. So chapter 1 of book 2 will be hitting stands December 3rd. Final order cutoff is this Monday, which is the 10th, I believe, November 10th. And then the hardcovers for the Kickstarter that is what funded Inferno Girl Red, those are en route from overseas right now. We've been waiting on them, but those will be getting fulfilled for backers as soon as they get to us. And then the fourth one that's pretty big is No One. No One is a true crime superhero mystery that Brian Buccellato and I wrote, and it's illustrated by Geraldo Borges. But it's a multimedia story. So it came out in 2022 and 2023. It was 10 issues long. There's a trade paperback of it out there. That's the best way to read it, honestly. We did something like 140 pages of art revisions for the trade paperback because the comic is, I don't know if anyone else has ever done this. I think it really is kind of the first of its kind. The book also incorporates an in-universe true crime podcast that we did as a scripted audio series with Rachel Lee Cook and Patton Oswalt. Lauren Lester from Batman the Animated Series voices No One for us. And there's an ARG that we ran alongside the book. So after every issue of the book, there's a corresponding podcast that you're supposed to listen to that is made by the 2 reporters in the book as they're covering the events of this accountability killing movement that sparks in Pittsburgh and this digital hacktivist No One, and what his identity is. And as suspects get named on the podcast, they start getting killed in the book. So it really does go back and forth. So the trade paperback has like 35 QR codes in it. All the in-universe websites we made for real, all the doxing material is for real, all of the newspaper articles. I hired a crime reporter from CNN and the Chicago Tribune to write them all with us. And we did all this because at the end of the book, there's a QR code, without spoiling anything, that takes you to a trailer, a live action trailer. That is how we announced last year that the story is continuing in a feature film. It's a found footage documentary style film that Brian and I are writing and I'm directing with Steven Schneider from Paranormal Activity and the Insidious films. He's producing it, and ZQ Entertainment financing and producing. And the film will both be an adaptation of the comic and audio series, but it will also continue the story. So it's one big multi-narrative. So the script is done. Like we're turning it in. We've been doing rewrites on it. And then the plan is to shoot next year. So that's something like if you haven't read No One yet, like now's the perfect time, because it's that rare case of like the movie actually is in universe with the comic. So it's not like an adaptation of the comic. It's actually a part of the story of the comic as well. All
right, so we're going to shift gears to Batman, and you brought up the Batman Immortal stuff, and that's the new stuff. But I want to go back to the way back machine, the new 52, and talk a little bit about Batman Eternal, which was a humongous collaborative thing that you did with James Tynion IV, Scott Snyder, Tim Seeley, Ray Fawkes, as well as yourself. And I'm just curious, bunch of writers, how did you guys split up all of those duties?
Well, so it was an interesting one. Very, very early on, I think the plan was for Scott, James, and myself to kind of run like the overall book, like the overall build out the overall narrative of it. And then I don't even remember exactly why, but I ended up not being on it initially. So Scott and James built the kind of the spine of the book, with predominantly by James. And then around, I want to say issue 9 or so, maybe earlier than that, I got a call that John Layman was going to be stepping off, and so they needed to bring someone else on, and they asked me if I would join, and so I did, and we did some summits in New York. I think we did 2 of them, or maybe only one of them, but in that it was about like breaking the moves of each. I don't remember how we broke it into thirds. So breaking the moves of chapters, 25 to whatever, and then beyond that. And then what you do is, I think each of us wrote an issue. I think there were 5 of us. So each of us wrote an issue or 2 issues that then had to link up to the next person's issue. So you were writing out of order, but if you look at the book, there are subplots that we go back and forth to. So we tried to structure it so that when certain subplots were becoming more prominent in that particular issue, like depending on who had a better handle on those subplots or who really liked that particular subplot, like they would take that issue. Like we brought back the Architect, which was the villain from Gates of Gotham. So like those were issues that I did. I think those were the first 2 issues I did in the 20s, I want to say. And then ultimately, like everyone reads everything, we talk about it, Scott and James will note it. Like James was really the glue that kind of held it all together. He's really good at that as well. So so that I was on the first one, and then they did it again for I think Batman and Robin Eternal, but I wasn't on that one.
Right.
Kyle, I'd say you and Dan Jurgens are the foremost Batman Beyond writers. In your opinion, what sets Batman Beyond?
Not Paul Dini.
Well, he's the creator, but as far as comic books, you two are like sheer pages. Is I'll put you guys' pages up against anybody, even Paul Dini.
What would you say sets Batman Beyond apart from regular old Bruce Wayne?
Well, I mean, I think so much of what makes Batman Beyond is the relationship with old Bruce Wayne. So I think that's actually kind of baked into the DNA of the concept,
Or should I correct myself? I'm sorry, I meant regular Batman Bruce Wayne.
No, I understand. But what I'm saying is that you never saw Bruce Wayne as Batman with an overbearing mentorship. Mm-hmm. Like he went through eras of training with different masters, and Ducard and Lady Shiva and others like that, but that's backstory. That's not like the main era of him being a superhero. I think the idea of essentially taking the archetypes from Spider-Man and applying them to a futuristic take on the Batman mythos and mixing in some the Mask of Zorro elements of Anthony Hopkins, mentoring young Antonio Banderas. It's just a really, really interesting mixture, and I think so much of that show and the comics to some extent, I have a kind of, I don't want to say strong opinion, but I have an opinion on what and why the comics work when they work. So much of it was at the show level was built on that like feeling of mystery. Like even though there's way less mythology episodes about like what happened in the past than you might think if you go back and look at it, when they would touch on stuff just often enough to get you to lean forward. So it was appealing to those, those of us that were fans of Batman the Animated Series and Bruce Wayne Batman, but also it had this kind of like underlying mystery of like, what the heck happened? Like, why does Barbara not talk to, why does she hate Bruce? Like, what happened to Dick Grayson? Like, what about Tim? Like, what went down, what about the Joker? And then on top of that, you have this teenager who is not on paper a good fit to be Batman. He's way more, Jason Todd or yeah, I'd say more of a Jason Todd than a Dick Grayson, learning to be not only a superhero, but a better person. And I think that, by the way, in the shadow of the greatest superhero to kind of ever live, especially in Gotham. And so I just think it's like a really, really potent recipe for a coming of age story and different version of the Batman mythos than we'd ever seen before. I also think it's why the comics, in my opinion, and this was when I launched Batman Beyond 2.0, this was like my big kind of thing about it, was the show pulled off the incredible, which was they had that slow simmer mystery about like what the heck happened, and then when they gave you the answers in Return of the Joker, I mean, they were epic. And that rarely happens, where the payoff is as good as the setup with stuff like that. But over the years, and this is with no disrespect to Adam Beechin or Dustin Wynn and Derek Friedhoffs, but I always felt like there was something missing a little bit from the comics after we got the answers on the show, because now it's just, teenage Batman, and it just didn't quite have that same level of intrigue to it. So for Batman Beyond 2.0, that was my whole thing, was like, let's do a 1 year later type jump forward, and let's change the status quo, and let's build in something that has that type of like intrigue engine, and breaking Bruce and Terry apart felt like a really good way to do that. And then what that led to and the why of it all was something that we were planning from very early on. But it was a really special book for me, because it was also coming at a time where I was coming off of Nightwing. I didn't have a great experience at DC at that point, in the New 52, and Batman Beyond 2.0 became like a really great kind of reset for me, where it's like I got to go kind of really like stretch my wings on a title and build it out with an editor who really trusted me and supported me, Alex Antone. And so much of that run actually became kind of like it kind of became the what's the Rosetta Stone? There's another one. It kind of became the I don't know, like the prototype of what I then did on Power Rangers and even Radiant Black to some extent. There's definitely influence from that run on kind of everything I've done since.
Now shifting gears to Immortal Batman,
yeah,
which is on stands right now. For the folks that may be interested, give us the pitch on Immortal Batman. We know it's an Elseworld story. You brought that up. But
Sure.
give us a little bit more about the premise.
So, Immortal Legend Batman is our sci-fi western tokusatsu Elseworlds take on Batman and the DC mythos. It's written by myself and Matt Groom, illustrated by Erica D'Urso, and colored by Igor Monti, and lettered by Becca Carey. So it really is, like I said before, the whole art team, or the whole creative team from Inferno Girl Red, plus myself. And it's a 6-issue Elseworlds that reimagines, like I said, Batman in the DC lore through this kind of galactic space opera type lens. There is a heavy Kamen Rider, Space Sheriff Gavan, Super Sentai, less Sentai, more Kamen Rider influence on it all, though. And that goes far beyond just the aesthetics. When we meet Batman in issue 1, he is coming off of what we later learn to have been the greatest mistake he's ever made, and he's determined to travel the cosmos to rectify it. There are these monstrous shadow energy creatures that may or may not have connection to the Immortal Legends powers and where they come from, that terrorize different galactic communities. But there's a new type that's out there, and it has to do with some mistakes that Bruce Wayne and Batman have made. The Immortal Legends are called that because in this version of the mythos, Batman, Robin, and Nightwing are believed to be immortal protectors, when in reality you learn in issue 1 that it's actually a mantle that's been passed down for hundreds of years. Might even be thousands. So it's a big sprawling canvas that we get to play on, and each issue, I guess the first 3 are out now, so I can talk about this. Our reimagining of the Rogues Gallery is the thing that Matt and I are the most, I don't want to speak for him, but it's one of the things I'm the most proud of. I'll put it that way. Because each one of the rogues looks like Bruce for some reason, while also being this shadow entity. And so you have the Two-Faced Man in chapter 1, you have the Bane of Man in chapter 2, and you have the Man of Riddles in chapter 3. The Man of Riddles in particular, we did something really special with that issue. The puzzles that Batman has to solve in order to save this young man's life in the issue, we actually built those puzzles for readers to solve as they're reading the comic. So it is a very immersive, interactive kind of storytelling experience, which is something that Matt and I were really, really excited about. It's the type of thing we do in the Massiverse books quite a bit, but we've never built like a full puzzle experience like this. It's huge props to Matt. We came up with the idea. I pitched him the idea in New York last year, and then we couldn't figure out quite how to do it for a while, and then he cracked it and built these really awesome puzzles that we wove into the narrative. It's 6 issues long. Dan Mora does all the covers. He also does all the character designs. And I'm literally wrapping up my pages on issue 6 right now. We're actually pretty much done. But it's been a really, really cool experience. And the first issue, well, all the issues have sold really well. So it's something that, it's been a nice way to kind of come back to DC.
I want to talk about the past a little bit. You worked with 2 prominent Japanese IPs, the Power Rangers and Ultraman. You even crossed over Ultraman with the Avengers. How'd you get the chance to do that crossover, and what research goes into a project like that?
For Ultraman?
Yes, Ultraman X Avengers.
Well, I mean, so Marvel reached out to me. It was actually Tom Brevoort, who was my first editor, reached out to me in October of 2019. I'd been done on Power Rangers for a little less than a year at that point, and I was doing little projects here and there. I did a Winter Soldier miniseries. I was just starting to build what became, Radiant Black, like I was saying before. And Tom just sent me this email with the subject line of Ultraman, and he was like, I know it would kind of pigeonhole you as the tokusatsu guy, but do you have any interest in Ultraman? And I wrote him back, and I was like, Tom, I'm 34. I've been doing comics for 10 years at this point. Like, I am fine being pigeonholed. Like, if it's yeah, I do like Ultraman. I think this could be cool. And so then it became research, like you said, watching a bunch of old episodes. There are some folks at a company called Starlight Runner, headlined by Jeff Gomez, who are consultants for Subaraya, and they were fantastic because Jeff in particular has an encyclopedic knowledge of Ultraman, and Subaraya, which is the Japanese company that owns Ultraman, has been making increasingly a bigger and bigger push into the Western markets. There was a lawsuit that kept, I believe it was out of Taiwan actually, that kept Ultraman from being able to broadcast in the US for like 30 years or something like that, because there were reruns of it in the 70s. When I do conventions and fans bring up issues of Ultraman, I can kind of always pinpoint their age, because they tend to be in this like sweet spot that were kids in the 70s when some of these rerun episodes were airing. But then that went away, and he wasn't here again until 2019 when we did the comic with Marvel. So Marvel in particular, Tom had kind of, I don't know how much of my Power Ranger stuff he read, but he and I had talked about Kamen Rider behind the scenes over the years, and he felt like I understood, or he thought I might understand kind of Toku and what makes it work in a larger context. And the first thing I said was like, I have to do this book with Matt Groom, because Matt is definitely more versed in it than I am, and he's a writer I really believe in, and was really going to bat for him and trying to get him more work for hire stuff, more Marvel and DC stuff. And I felt like this would be, like we were talking about before, putting people in positions to succeed. I felt like, knowing the type of writer Matt was and the type of like mythology builder that he was, I felt like this was a perfect situation to bring him into. And I think we really impressed Subaraya and Marvel with our vision for it. From the get-go, the first question that was brought up at lunch was like, not by me, but it was like, so we're gonna cross over with Marvel, right? And that, it took a little while. I'm sure there were rights stuff to negotiate and everything else, but that was actually kind of, I think Tom even floated it in one of the early emails saying like, we don't know when, but inevitably we'll probably do this, and we have to design it to be modular, so it should feel like it continues from the miniseries that we will have done up to that point, but also like, if we can't reprint it for whatever reason, like the miniseries should also work on their own, and anything after that comes out without it. So we did that. That wrapped up earlier this year, and they just announced actually last week that we are doing one more story. It's a 25-page one-shot called The Fall of Ultraman, and it will wrap up what we've been building for 5 years, which is crazy to think about and say, but also even crazier to try to do in only 25 pages. But we took a swing. I think it's going to be a really cool one.
Last couple of questions here, Kyle. I want to know, how'd you get to work with Kid Cudi on Moon Man? Was that a random pairing, or did you know him prior?
I didn't know him, no. So Scott's, there's a connection with my manager and Scott's president of, at the time, his president of Mad Solar. And the connection is they're married. So my manager, Stuart Manischel, had been, I guess Karina Manischel, his wife, she had been talking about how Scott, they wanted to do an original black superhero comic. And I think she took some meetings around town in LA. And I think, as the story goes, Stuart at one point just said to her, like, just stop. Like, you need to talk to Kyle. And I hadn't met Karina yet. So I get this email from Stuart, and which often happens. And it's just like someone named Karina is CC'd into, and he's like, Kyle, talk to Karina. I'm like, okay, who is this man? You know, oh, okay. Once I got the context, I understood. But basically, she took a look at Radiant Black and what we were doing, and then Scott took a look at Radiant Black and all the other kind of real contemporary superhero stuff we were doing. And we started doing Zooms, yeah, it grew from there. And then we put together what became Moon Man and walked it to Image. And you know, we've put out 7 issues so far. There's some stuff on the business side that Scott's sorting out. So issue 8 is done, but we had to put the book on pause as some of this stuff gets figured out. And I didn't want to put out issue 8 since it's a return to like the present day story with Marco Licati. I didn't want to put it out when we weren't sure when we were going to be able to do issue 9. But we are bringing the book back. It's coming back. There are some plans in the works. But it was really, really cool. He's a pretty awesome guy. He bought me some Jordans for my birthday. I bought him a Jock, or actually Jock gifted it to me for him. This awesome Mondo screen print from the first Ninja Turtles movie. So we often communicate in Ninja Turtles photos and memes. That's our relationship. But yeah, it's been a blast.
Okay, Kyle, we're on our very last question. Is there something that we haven't talked about you want the fans to know about? Any upcoming appearances? Any new projects?
Is that your last question? Is what do I want to talk about?
Yeah, what?
Yeah, well, Kelly McMahon, Eduardo Ferragato, Marcelo Costa, and Abel, who does Rogue Sun, we're all going to be at CCXP together in Sao Paulo in early December. So definitely come out if you're in Brazil. And there may or may not be some forthcoming news about some Portuguese editions of Radiant Black, but I can't say anything more than that at this stage, unfortunately.
Well, awesome, Kyle. This was great. Wonderful interview. Thank you for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedule. Just know you always have a home here on the Sig Slayers station. Well, that's all for our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe and hit the like button. This is Sig Slayers. I'm Mike, speaking for Mark and Kyle Higgins. We are out. Peace.
Sig Slayers.